be impeached. Both Democrats and Republicans are on side now. Yeah. Welcome back, and John Moore is here. And, of course, your website is thelibertyman.com. You have a show from 6 to 7 a.m. Monday to Friday, Central Standard Time on Republic Radio with Ed Morrison. John, you got some really interesting things that are going on with your hometown of St. Louis.
Right now, all the headlines, thank you, Doctor. All the headlines on Drudge right now are about my hometown, St. Louis, Missouri, one of the suburbs of St. Louis, a place called Ferguson, Missouri. I've been to Ferguson multiple times. I have friends that live there. There was a altercation between an 18-year-old black male and a Ferguson police officer Saturday. The 18-year-old male ended up dead, shot to death by the police officer. I'm not sure exactly what happened, and apparently the authorities aren't either. Regardless, there were vigils yesterday, Sunday, and at the end of the day, last night, people decided that they would riot and loot and burn, which continues. I just got a first-hand report from a very good friend of mine who's a police officer on the scene. He's been there continuously for 32 hours straight. He says there are now 2,000 police officers on the scene, busloads of people coming in from I don't know where, but they're not from that community, to do whatever they're going to do. Intelligence reports the police are getting is that both Cabela's and Bass Pro, nationwide sporting goods chains, are going to be attacked this evening to an attempt to get firearms and ammunition from those locations. Homes in Ferguson, Missouri are now burning, so these just a duplicate of what happened in Los Angeles in the LA riots. They're burning their own homes down. And we don't know what's going to happen. We're also getting intelligence reports, that the rioters are going to pull Caucasians out of their cars and beat them up in an attempt to cause serious bodily harm or death to Caucasians driving through these areas. It's night will fall in about 4.5 hours from now, and that's when everybody is holding their breath to see what will happen. The fires are already burning. They're shooting at the police. They're shooting at police helicopters as we speak, Doctor. This has been going on all day long.
I wonder what they think that's going to accomplish, because whoever is pushing this among the black community know this is counterproductive. This is the kind of stuff that not only it makes groups of whites doing civilian militia, and I'm not talking about just the skinhead kind of neo-Nazis, we're just talking about white militia, go crazy. And if they just grab people that are innocent and just beat the hell out of them or kill them or destroy their property, you've got a very important point to make about property destruction or death, and even insurance coverage.
Yes.
When you told me that's important.
All our listeners, especially you listeners in the major cities, if you or someone you know owns a business in a city or anywhere, if there's civil disorder and there's property damage to the building, damage to the contents of the building, the inventory, or loss of income, none of those insurances apply. The property, the building insurance will not pay out. The insurance on the inventory won't pay out, and your continuity of business insurance won't pay out either. In fact, even if you die, there will be the life insurance for most life insurances will not pay out in the event of civil disorder. There are some. When I went back in the Army Reserve in 1979, Doctor, I had to research 10 or 12 insurance companies to find one that would pay out if I had the misfortune of dying in combat defending this country. And I did find one. At the time it was New York Life. Regardless, some things that did not exist during the LA riots. There was no such thing as Twitter in the LA riot during that period of time. There was no such thing as email in the modern sense of the word during the LA riots. Communications between large numbers of people simply did not exist in the way they exist now. So what happened last night, there was at least a dozen businesses, including Walmart and Sam's and liquor stores, shoe stores, Radio Shack, and others were attacked, invaded, and looted and burned to the ground.
What's going to happen with these stores, because if this is the insurance reality, if the stores have any sense, and hopefully they're listening to this too, they're going to start doing things like they do in places like, Central and South America. They're going to hire private security firms that are going to be flak-jacketed, ski masked, armed to the eyeballs, and they're going to have higher levels of perimeter security. And you're going to have metal detectors in the building when you walk in, and maybe bomb detectors, who knows what, so that people can be securely inside a Walmart or a shopping center. And I think that you're going to find, with this kind of terrorism, because that's what it is, that this falls straight into what the government wants. They don't want things to be normal. They don't want groups to work things out to figure out why is such and such a person being, targeted. Of course, what you see is whenever a white person's killed in one of these events, nobody has riots. But when a black person, it seems like all the people like Al Sharpton and everybody show up, they whip it out of control, when really they need to deal with the issue. Is there a disproportionate attack on blacks? We know, for example, that blacks occupy a greater percentage of the drug trade, for example, in California and elsewhere in prisons, by an 8 times margin. So if you're a white person and caught with drugs, you're more likely to get off, and if you're black, you're more likely to be cooling your heels in prison. So there are some realities there. On the other hand, I don't think the solution is rioting, because all it's going to do is it's going to guarantee that these ghetto areas in the inner city, shopping centers, are going to become police zones, where if you go in there, it's almost like walking to a security zone in an airport. Everywhere you go, you're going to have to go through metal detectors, full-body terahertz scanners, sniffing machines to make sure you're not carrying any biological or other material that's dangerous. And eventually, every shopping mall, every airport, every bus station will be basically a terror interception zone. And that's where I see this going. I don't think this is all going to be good. It's not going to be good for the black people, the white people, and it's going to guarantee that civilian militias will get a lot stronger than any federal government can deal with. And that's why when the government decides to get strong arm and have all these Bearcats out, because I heard that they have been breaking out their fancy weapons they got from the military now, so they got tanks out there and Bearcats. Is that true?
Well, they're actually, that's a misnomer. A tank is a vehicle with no wheels. It has treads, but
right. But they have these Bearcat. They have these Bearcat armored personnel carriers, which are kind of very heavily armed. Yeah.
So, and
yeah.
I mean, a lot of civilians don't know the difference, but they are wheeled vehicles, but they're armored wheeled vehicles. Right. And the officers of St. Louis County Police, they do carry automatic weapons in their patrol cars with them, so they got those whenever they're on duty. Right. And there's 2,000 officers in that very concentrated area of North St. Louis County right now as we speak, right. And probably more on the way. I don't believe the National Guard's been activated, to my knowledge. That would make the news. But if you go to Drudge Report, there's 8 or 10 stories there with photographs and videos and so forth of the looting, the rioting. I don't think they're covering homes being burned down yet. In fact, the coverage has been not very complete. What I'm getting firsthand, Doctor, from my friend, the police officer on the ground, is far worse. He says, John, this is worse than anything I saw in Iraq or Afghanistan. And
really?
He's also a Vietnam vet. So,
what does he think is going to come out of it? Because I see pictures that are being put up on Drudge.
All he knows is there's busloads of people arriving from other communities. Al Sharpton is on the way. Intelligence reports coming in of pending attacks on these nationwide sporting goods chains, Cabela's and Bass Pro, which both have large inventories of firearms, rifles, shotguns, pistols, ammunition. So they're on high alert. My friend has been on duty 32 hours. Homes are burning as we speak in that part of the country. They're burning their own homes, which they did in Los Angeles. So he's not making any predictions. He's just taking a step at a time and trying to get through this thing alive and keep his buddies alive.
Well, listen, what I'm worried about is not what's going to happen in the short term. What's happening in the long term is policies that are going to happen in multiple states where they're going to start increasing security, hire private security firms. Like if you go to the malls, for example, in Saudi Arabia or other countries where they want to have pro-Western malls, like in India, you have private security firms. And I think that this is what you're going to see come out of this in the inner cities or in shopping areas, especially now they know their insurance isn't going to cover. How many people are going to pay in sense protection to have private security firms say, rioting in this zone, you riot, you die, or you're going to have a bad day. If you get private security with flak jacket, with the smoke guns and LRAD cannons and all kinds of other anti-personnel devices that are used in warfare, I don't think it's a... Well, John, you mentioned on the break a prediction that you see this going.
Here's my prediction. There's a heavy law enforcement presence in North St. Louis County right now, and you're going to find a heavy police presence around any and all businesses, all retail establishments, business offices, and so forth. When the rioters realize they can't get close to their targets of choice, whether it's Bass Pro or Cabela's, they're going to turn in on themselves. And there's precedence for this. Is no brilliant idea on my part. This has happened in the past, and the L.A. riots being the most recent time. They'll burn their own neighborhoods. They will burn
by the
their
way,
own homes.
I want to raise a couple questions. First one is an interesting article I'm seeing here. It's saying that U.S. lawmakers warn of ISIS attack on American soil. Now, ISIS is our group that we're supporting the change in the president of Iraq, which is all illegal, not voted in at all. And that's why Maliki says he's not going to leave, and he has the primary military force behind him. I think that there's a lot of other forces, including, quote, Islam in America, Black Islam. I think the Black Panther movement has gone underground, but I don't think it's gone. And I think a lot of these spokespeople like Al Sharpton and others like to keep things whipped up because that's how they keep their job. If they don't have the dialectic of not getting along with Whitey, and be honest with you, the very fact is we have a half-white, half-black president. Most of these, quote, black people aren't 100% black. They got a lot of white genes in them and other Hispanic and other nationalities. Go over to Africa and find out. Do a gene analysis through 23andMe. It's just ridiculous that we have this kind of dialogue going all the time. And by the way, it's an attack against anybody living in the inner city, black, white, or any other racial group, because they bring the illegal drugs in. They want war. They want to break up the family, which is why they have the social welfare safety net where you can't have a husband. So these women are constantly having babies, and they're getting supported by a social welfare network where there's no real family support. So it's not surprising these are multi-generational black boys, basically, that join gangs just like they do in Central and South America, because if you don't belong to a gang in Guatemala and Nicaragua, you don't live. If you don't have a tattoo on you that says you belong to a gang X or Y, you don't. There's your mama and your papa. They're the ones that protect you.
Let me tell you a couple things, and very few white people know what I'm about to tell you. There's something in the inner city called trophy money. Trophy money. This is the money paid by the mother who gets the increased welfare benefits to the father of the child that she did not marry. Right. And this is a monthly stipend. I had a client charged with first-degree murder, and he was very proud of the 5 children he had from 5 different women, and the fact that he got trophy money from each of these 5 women every month, and that's what it's called in the inner city, is trophy money. Another little-known fact: if you drive through the inner city, you'll see occasionally about one home out of 15, one home out of 20 that has a really bright day-glow paint around the trim of the windows and the trim of the doors. And it's a very bright day-glow, gaudy, bright color. And
what color is it usually?
They could be bright yellows, bright pinks, bright blues, real gaudy.
Around the windows and doors, right?
The trim of the door. Now, you may think, and before I knew the reason behind it, I thought, well, they got either they're colorblind or they got the paint on sale. It turns out there's a belief that if you have these bright colors and around the trim of your doors and windows, it will keep out the haints. The haints, that's ain't with an H in front of it. The haints are evil spirits. And if you have these gaudy day-glow colors painted around your trim of your doors and windows, this will keep away the haints.
That sounds to me awful like voodoo, because I noticed when I was working down in Georgia, I couldn't believe
that culture.
I couldn't believe how much of the blacks of the East United States, and we're not talking about all over the place down there, all along the entire East Coast, believed in one or another aspect of voodoo. And a lot of them had these ceremonies in Georgia. In fact, I saw a 10-year-old that got terminal AIDS, and he was dying with a CD4 cell count at 11 years of age, almost 10 and a half, almost 11. And he had never had sex and never had IV drugs, but he drank blood from a ceremony done with people who had AIDS, with turkey blood and other things. So people need to realize you're dealing with a pretty bizarre culture.
There's another aspect to that, and this takes place in the black society also. If typically a black woman would bring leftovers to work, say spaghetti with meat sauce. None of her co-workers will eat it because there's something that takes place in black culture where the woman will take some of her own blood and mix it in with the tomato sauce because it's easily concealed.
Oh, really?
The belief is that when she does that, it will have her man be more attracted to her as opposed to other women. And that's another part of black culture that's not commonly known.
Oh, no. So bloodborne diseases, which include, by the way, hepatitis C, Chagas spirochetosis, many of these other bloodborne diseases, by the way, including Lyme disease, which is bloodborne. That's why any insect that can carry a partial blood meal can transmit these bugs, and including many of the infections like West Nile virus. So people don't realize any insect that can get a partial blood meal and bite you can potentially transfer these infections.
Right. There's a lot of ignorance in both black and white communities about our own history. I did watch the film Lincoln, and we had blacks on there reciting from memory the Gettysburg Address, and not knowing that the Emancipation Proclamation did not free the blacks in the two northern states where slavery was still legal. It only freed blacks where they couldn't free blacks, which was in a separate country. The Confederate States of America was a different country, and the President of the United States had no authority to free anybody there from anything. But they took great pride in memorizing the Emancipation Proclamation, despite the fact that it did not free the blacks that were in the two slaveholding states that were still part of the United States.
Yeah, the northern states, you mean?
Right, the two northern states that still had legalized slavery when the Civil War began.
Yeah,
of course, it wasn't the Civil War. The Civil War.
Well, they tried to say it was dealing with the emancipation of blacks was the cause of the Civil War, and it was only a side issue. The key issue was the control of the southern states by the British bankers and the British oligarchs and the powerful billionaires. They were trying to keep, and the North wanted to keep the South only manufacturing cotton and so on, and not into manufacturing weapons or anything else. They wanted to keep them in that state.
Well, if blacks in the South were so adamantly opposed to slavery, which I'm sure if you're a slave you would not like that on one hand. On the other, many thousands of black men were issued weapons, rifles by the South, put in uniform and trained and were part of the Southern, the Confederate States of America Army fighting against the Northern invaders. That's not well known, and I was in my 50s before I even knew that, Doctor. This is kept in public school education. You're told it was a civil war. You cannot have a civil war between two countries. A civil war has to take place inside the confines of one country. Confederate States of America was already a separate country with its own constitutional, its own elected government, its defined borders, its own currency, and everything that constitutes a freestanding, separate nation. What happened in that war was an invasion of one country against another.
And they conquered them, and that's the... Yeah.
And that was it.
By the way, people don't draw an analogy between that and what's going on in Israel right now, which is reprehensible, and even worse than probably the Civil War or anything else that happened. They call it Civil War, which really was not a Civil War at all. Amazing.
This GCN.
Welcome back, and as a follow-up to what you just mentioned there, John, about the so-called non-Civil War, a war of conquest of the South, is the conquest of America by people like General Petraeus, who's actually recently had a meeting and mentioned that. And I was reading all about this. It's actually quite interesting to read what Petraeus said, that he's now acceding to the fact that maybe we should just consider it North America, not even America, or Canada or Mexico. And remember, if you read the September 1973 issue of Foreign Affairs, the Journal of the Council on Foreign Relations, they said they wanted 10 zones on the planet. Trade zones. Zone number 3 is North America, Canada, the United States, Mexico, where they've been working for decades over multiple regimes of Canadian, American, and Mexican rulers to actually normalize their insurance laws, their social security laws, all kinds of things. And I think the latest moves by Obama is just another one of these moves toward the free movement of people and trade, etc., across Mexico. I remember just a few years ago that Obama had this test in his first term where he had all kinds of truckers coming up from the Mexican side, And these were not properly trained, properly certified by, Department of Motor Vehicles, or physically trained, or the rigs actually checked to make sure they're mechanically stable or safe to be on our freeways. And now these trucks are literally all over the place. They're all over. They're right up to the Canadian border. And, of course, somebody says they think the Trans-Texas Corridor stopped. No, they renamed it. So even people like Mr. Governor Perry, they're not coming clean over the fact that all the components are still being put together. And when General Petraeus, by the way, who's Jesuit trained, makes these statements, it's like, you got to understand the globalists are still at work, piece by piece, mile by mile, putting everything together to have total control of the world. When people want to say that they have a right to an opinion, the word, and this is Latin, word opine means you have experience or physical facts that can't be disputed from multiple sources, and you have a reason to believe that. But if you haven't been there, and you don't have facts, you don't have an opinion, you have an attitude. And there's a heck of a lot of difference. That's why there's certain issues that I say where I've been through an experience or I have the facts because I've been firsthand there. It's not open to your opinion. That might tick you off. That's too bad. You just have to accept those are the facts as I present them. And you might say, well, I have a right to an opinion. No, you don't. You have a right to an attitude. You might have an opinion on something else completely different or a side issue. But on these kind of things like the facts about the so-called Civil War or what's going on with American policy, now they're saying they're all frightened about a terrorist attack on American soil by ISIS. We support ISIS. We're sending them weapons. We gave them 74 Stinger missiles a month ago. Do we realize that we're supporting terrorists that have said they're going to set up man pads and take out American and European jets with these man pads? Do we realize that they have extreme elements that hate our guts and want Islam to rule from everywhere, including the new Islamic state of Michigan, where I was born in Detroit, and states where if they have just even a large minority of Muslim population, they want Sharia law. And people don't realize what Sharia law is. Sharia law means women are chattel. If you want to know what real slavery is, it's not civil war during the Second World War, during 200 years ago in America, where people were treated with some respect because they were considered, valuable property. Women are treated where honor killings, if they accuse you of being having sex out of wedlock, they can honor kill you. And people don't realize what Islam does and what Sharia law is, and this is not just extreme Islam; it's all Islam. It's a vile religion, vile. And that's why you don't see the moderate Muslims criticizing the extreme ones, because they're all the same. The extreme ones are just crazy enough that they're going to take a bomb to a shopping center or blow up an aircraft or do other vile things. But ultimately, they all want, one form or another, and they're all fighting each other to try to be the leader. They all want ruling the world, in the same way as the Sabbatean Jews run the state of Israel and our banking system. We have a bunch of different devils, different Walmart versions of Satanism, all fighting each other for the top king of the hill so they can control us all, primarily with a vastly reduced population all these Satanists agree on, Agenda 21, which is why the IMF director has made the statement that they should depopulate the Imperial Valley of California because of drought. They should start significantly reducing the California population because they can't support it. Where do people like the IMF director get off? Having a public opinion to make statements like that. She needs to shut the heck up. And we need to have people realize that on certain issues, including news pundits on television and radio, they don't have a right to an opinion, especially when people talk about medical issues. I've heard, and I'm not going to comment who said it, that patients coming in from these countries need to go to a class 4 installation. A class 4 installation is a lab. They need to go to what's called a high level, what's called the highest level medical isolation facility, and they need to come in a private flight, not a public flight. And rather than bringing in their journeys through the emergency department or past somebody that doesn't have biological protection on. So when you're talking about things you don't know about, please don't open your yap, because you don't know what you're talking about. Okay?
It's usually obvious pretty quickly, Doctor, when you either talk or write about something you don't know about. And one of my passions in life is reading, and I can tell in the first few paragraphs, whatever book I might be reading, if the author doesn't have a clue what they're writing about.
You've taught me some more things about the Civil War, but I knew some of these already. When you talk to the South, they know that they were conquered. When you talk to the natives, they know they were conquered. And by the way, a lot of these natives were trying to negotiate with the rest of the country, and that's why a lot of these native territories, when they had, quote, treaties, they knew the native people could slaughter them all, even because they eventually got guns and horses, and they were super physically fit. If it wasn't for, quote, treaties with some of these populations, especially the Sioux in western United States and other tribes, a white man wouldn't have been able to safely go west at all. So the fact is that there's large chunks of America, if they just got together and decided to form their own country like the nations that are the Sioux in the western United States, they could form their own country within the United States. There's not a darn thing that the U.S. federal government can do about it.
Well, Indian politics, and we don't have time to really get into it, but I have a very dear friend, my webmaster, who's Native American. He's been active in Native American politics for quite a few years. It's pretty bizarre, quite frankly. For example, we had a chief who was going to do a public presentation about the legacy of his tribe, and he was prohibited by the federal government from doing it unless he had a special license, and he would actually have been jailed. So it's really very strange what goes on with. I think
you should have just done civil disobedience and done it anyway. Every day when we come on the program, we're civilly disobedient. The fact is, and if you read line by line of the Patriot Act 1 and the parts that were brought in little chunks of Patriot Act 2, every day you and I do things that could be jailed, imprisoned, and or executed by the Patriot Act alone. Okay? I know that every day, if I was broadcasting the show, when I was temporarily for a few years up in Eastern Canada, and I was actually in the studios in Halifax, Nova Scotia, on the largest broadcasting network across Canada, and I come in there actually in a weekly show, and for a while there, they were so excited about having me because I was really getting ratings right through the ceiling. But I'd touch on stuff that was like, oh, you can't say that, so I'm going to say it. And the ratings went skyrocket until eventually got calls from the federal officials saying, if this guy keeps on talking about this stuff, we're going to shut down your radio station and your entire network across the country, and you're all going to jail. And the guy that I work with actually had the most popular show across Canada, the talk radio show. He got kicked out of his job after they eventually got so ticked off with him and realized, like, oh my gosh, this guy's a liability. He's bringing Deagle on all the time, and they're getting in this nice fancy studio talking away. And this was, by the way, while I was still doing my show on Genesis Network when I was up in Canada temporarily, and I was doing, I think, 3 hours a day. I was also doing these other shows across Canada. And I was told when I went to Canadian pro-life conferences, like one in Winnipeg, and It's a New Day Ministry, they said, if you start saying anything against any racial group, any religious group, the federal government, they'll march through the door, arrest you on the spot, and they'll take away our CRTC license. And I said, don't trust me that I won't. And of course, Betty Miller-Teason, he's a rocket engineer, and his wife, they were kind of nervous because they knew that I was kind of like, a little uncontrollable, let's put it that way.
Right.
And, I did kind of freak them out a bit, and I got as close as I could to the issues without actually getting the CSIS and the RCMP officers arriving at the studios, which is the second largest in Canada. But, let's put it this way. We're always civil disobedient. Tough luck.
Absolutely. Government,
take it and take a flying leap. We don't care. So, John, let's do an update on what's going on in Ukraine and what's happening here in America with Ebola. I think Ebola is going to be a big issue. It's much bigger than the old Ebola version, but it's not as transmissible. But as we raised it on Friday, and I want to repeat that, I know Ann was talking about using chlorine for water. Firstly, water is not going to be your source of getting infection. It's going to be droplet spray, blood, mucus, and stool, etc., from people. It's not going to survive going to the central sewage plants. It's going to be when people are taking care of people dying from it, or if you go to a bathroom and somebody's had bloody diarrhea or coughed on you in the next seat in the airplane, or they blow it back in your face, then yes, maybe you can get exposed. And especially if they're shedding virus for weeks beforehand, and especially the first 4 or 5 days just before they get violently ill. What I think is going to happen is people need to increase their antipathogenics. There's no public health measures whatsoever to stop this. Public health measures meaning the World Health Organization hasn't changed travel plans, hasn't changed isolation plans. It's only individual airlines or countries. Nobody coming from these countries by any means, aircraft or whatever, since 2014 should be allowed into the country unless they go to quarantine for 1 month. They should have serum drawn right away. They should have, been in isolation. And we're not talking about class 4. That's ridiculous. That's a negative pressure lab.
Right.
We're talking about full isolation where people walk in bodysuits, where they don't walk around in just gloves and gowns and face masks, which is we call basic level 1, just in an emergency department. We're talking about people who are in space suits, so you don't breathe a particle of oxygen or air that's breathed by people that are in super isolation. Okay? Right. So the people that talk about this and don't know what they're talking about or haven't been in an isolation ward before, they need to shut the heck up, because they're really putting things in danger. And the politicians who don't know anything about this, you need to call your congressman and say, why don't you call Deagle up? Why don't you have him submit something to Congress? Because obviously the infectious disease wards like Emory and elsewhere, they're saying a few things, but not enough. They're just trying to get some news out there. What they really should be saying is, why are you letting people go through commercial airliners or coming in a boat or just driving across the border if they come from another country? And then we got the craziness of not only people coming up from Mexico, but there's people from the Middle East coming over here getting ready for a great big war in the Middle East, and they're from Yemen, from Saudi Arabia, and these other countries, including ISIS, and now they're worried about ISIS. We're sending them weapons.
That's right.
So the likelihood if a big war starts, we're going to have terrorism in American soil, cyber terrorism, power lines out, biological weapons spread, dirty bombs, etc., is a virtual guarantee. And people say, oh, Dr. Deagle, you're exaggerating. No, I'm not. You start bombing the heck out of Tehran or Damascus or other places and start blowing away thousands or millions of people, you're going to have a really rough day. And if people in America think they're going to go to the shopping mall or go to watch a movie or go to their local pizza parlor and it's going to be safe, they're nuts. They're nuts. And if they go out and they don't have adequate police, even if they hired 500,000 Russian soldiers, which they don't have enough to do that anyway, or Chinese, which they don't have enough either, they would still not be enough to patrol the streets and keep anybody safe, even if they were good guys, which they aren't. So, people really need to realize that what the government's doing is insane. And as they keep aggravating Russia, they increase the chances that Russia is going to do something catastrophic in Kiev. NATO basically is aggravating the heck out of them, saying, Russia's basically said, if you put NATO troops there, we're going to target your city. So there's been a number of Russian Tu jets with these heavy bombers over American cities or European cities literally every week now, threatening us and saying, we're going to drop bombs on your cities. I'm thinking, don't people get this?
We need to do a segue here, Doc. I have an agricultural update that I didn't get out. I need to get out.
Go ahead.
This is an agricultural update for the United States grain growing industry. The soybean crop is going to be about half of what it should be. The corn crop will have a dramatic reduction. I'm not sure yet if it's 25, 30% or half, but there will be a dramatic loss in the corn crop as well, leading the experts in the grain industry to say, quote unquote, by early spring of 2015, which is 6 months away, or early 2015, there will be famine conditions inside the United States and, of course, the Western world because of the other countries importing our grains. So that's the agricultural update.
And that makes sense. And, of course, part of that is because of the drought, which is, by the way, caused by geoengineering, a lot of it blocking the radiation. The other part is the fact that we're having increased ultraviolet light. You can get, I go in my pool. I don't sun at all, but I go in my pool, and I've actually noticed I get a tan all the way to my feet, and I'm in the pool. So people need to realize this. If you aren't wearing eye protection, proper hats, and garments all the way down to your wrists, you're going to get sunburned, and you're going to get eye damage, you're going to get cancer, you're going to get immune suppression. People don't realize it's because of what they're doing to the upper atmosphere and the changes in the sun. And, the globalists are becoming aware because I'm sure they get internal reports that say there's something bad happening. A lot of it is amplified by whatever we're doing, which is making things a lot worse. Fukushima's chewing up the ozone layer as well with radioiodine and xenon and other molecules that are doing it, but we're also putting nanoparticle aluminum, barium, strontium, and thorium. So what do they expect to happen? We know it chews it up. So, and people want to disagree and say, oh, well, there's no such thing as geoengineering the weather. I will give them an extensive lecture on exactly how they do it in extreme detail. But people who don't want to believe that is thinking, I'm really getting sick and tired of people who want to disagree with something where I know it firsthand, took care of the pilots flying out of Buckley and Peterson firsthand talked to Dr. Isley at the World Constitution Parliament Association, spent an entire evening, who founded the United Nations World Constitution Parliament Association from 1957. People need to get a life. They need to realize that the technology we have, which is being massively misused to literally weaponize the planet itself, is crazy. It's evil. And yet, even though it's going to cause famine and destruction, they don't care. In fact, that's what they want. They'd like to have famine and destruction. They'd like to have dome cities so anybody outside just dies from hypoxia and toxic ultraviolet light and heavy metals and radioisotopes because we start some limited nuclear wars. They like it. They want to see things happen that are going to be catastrophic because they don't want life extension technology to go to the masses. They don't want a non-toxic world so you can be outside and survive anywhere. They don't want it. The globalists are demonically energized. And people say, no, you're exaggerating. I said, no, I'm not exaggerating. That's why if you listen to what we say, because you're not going to hear this unless you actually hear the craziness of being inside meetings at Bohemian Grove, which just ended about, a week ago, up in Russian River. People don't realize these meetings like Bohemian Grove and the Bilderbergers, they talk about how they're deciding what's going to happen to the rest of the world.
That's right. That's exactly what they do.
And they act like somehow they have the right of kings to go do it. And people say, you're exaggerating, you're mentally ill, what's wrong with you? Why do you talk like this? And I'm thinking, because it's reality. If you don't face reality, you're going to be a victim of it. Again,
be run over by
if knowledge is truth and truth is power, do you want to be powerless because you have no truth? Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and life. If you're a real Christian, you have to face the truth. Beautiful or ugly as it is, you have to face it.
I agree, absolutely, Doctor. And you need to educate yourself, understand who these enemies are, otherwise you're hopelessly lost.
Any kind of prepper tips you want to give today before we close off? And, of course, you'll be back on Friday with our special panel on preparedness and earth changes.
There's a gentleman, he's a former Muslim who's converted to Christianity. His name's Waleed Shubat.
Yes. Waleed's been on the program before. He's great.
Yeah, I want to have him on my show, but people need to educate themselves. There's no better, and there's a number of authors who've written excellent books about the reality of Islam, but there's nothing better than a person who came out of it, grew up in it, and figured out how evil it was, than to read what Mr. Shubat does at his website, which is shubat.com. That's SHOEBAT.
Yeah.
And watch the movie he put together, which you can watch for free at his website. And let people know about this, because this is certainly one of the clear and present dangers, not only to the United States, but the entire Western civilization, these Islamic people who want to conquer the world.
And by the way, the Islamists are not the ones controlling the world. They're just be used like a whore and thrown at the window of the Cadillac at 85 or 90 miles an hour to be smashed into bits. So Islam will be destroyed by the globalists too. So that's their goal. And you can see it right back from their documents over 100 years ago. They plan to use Sabbatean Jewry and Islamic extremism to eventually smash both of them into non-existence. So
absolutely. Yep.
That's reality. They already wrote about it. If you have the skills of reading, you can realize we didn't just make this up. We don't believe in fright tales from the dark side. We're just trying to wake you up, and that's why you have to be aware of taking care of your own health. Don't believe that you have a constitutional republic unless you force it to behave as such, because they try to destroy the Constitution, and Obama is not our president. He's simply a functionary of the globalist bankers and their policies, and he's done everything to destroy the republic. So, same with Mr. Boehner. I always get to him as, this guy is a real joke. We need to impeach Boehner first, then Obama second. How's that?
Okay, I'll go along with that program. Well, Doctor, this is Liberty Man signing off.
Thank you, John. Again, the LibertyMan.com, John's show, 6 to 7 Central Time, Monday to Friday. Back tomorrow. Take care.